What's up, everyone? It's Bones here. I'd like to begin this video by giving a huge shout out to TCG Player for the opportunity to be a part of their affiliate program. If you want to help a content creator out, all you have to do is click on the TCG Player link down below, and it won't cost you anything either. I tried to be as objective as possible when collecting the replays for this video, and the only way I felt I could approach that through a replay video was to highlight the deck's highs and lows, as well as some different matchups. Our opponent is on Rescue Ace, and it's kind of the third wheel amongst fire decks, but a powerful deck nonetheless. I did get the luxury of going first, but he has a couple of cards in hand that you can see off rip with the Imperm and Super Poly, which happen to work pretty well against the Exodia deck. Now, we're going to begin this one by using the shield in hand, and you can technically use the shrine in order to place the shield, but I was trying to commit less resources to board, see what would happen if I activated the Millennium shield, and if we get the Millennium cross, then it kind of meant that we could potentially keep playing without our opponent doing anything here if we didn't see any type of response. Of course, our opponent could have their always chain thing off, but we'll then be able to use the effect of the shrine, which will then be able to get ourselves the right leg onto the spell and trap zone along with the caveman. And the caveman is really nice because we can special summon it and then get another Millennium monster or Sengenjin to our hand. Of course, we don't play the Sengenjin, we have no reason to yet. Maybe with future support we might, but also to keep in mind, you see that our opponent has Imperm in hand, and you can't Imperm the search effects because the special summon and the add are all part of one effect. As we're going to get ourselves the Golem effect in hand, we're not paying life points because we have the cross in hand, which was why it was also important to resolve the shield first, I felt. But we'll then be able to get ourselves another copy of Shrine, activate the Millennium Cross, as we'll then be able to get ourselves the Phantom Incarnate. We'll then activate the Pot of Prosperity, which will only dig 3 to save extra deck resources, and we're going to end up hitting a Droll, which is really nice. Of course, we don't add the Shifter because the Prosp is going to the graveyard anyways, but now we're going to use the Incarnate, which will get us the Exodo Flame, and this is a really nice card just because it's a board wipe as long as we do control the Phantom Incarnate. And another thing about that is that the Incarnate also gives you that spell and trap negation, which can be protection for it, which just complements it really well. But we're going to see our opponent top deck the Dia Bellstar. They're going to pitch a Contain for it, activate the Dia Bellstar, getting themselves the original. From here, they'll activate the Super Poly, and they'll be able to get rid of the Exodia fusion along with the Dia Bellstar, get the Garura, as they're going to activate the original. And at this point, I'm thinking that's perfectly fine because we can draw after they draw, and that will essentially end their turn as they can't search with Hydrant anyways, unless they have something like Emergency in hand, which would let them special summon something else. But regardless, I was pretty confident in my position because we had something like the Enemy Controller, which is something that's also really nice because these bodies essentially do nothing during your opponent's turn, and they just stick on field because of the Millennium Cross. You can't link away with them after summoning out your Exodia fusion, so having the potential to just tribute off one of your own monsters, steal your opponent's, or in this case, you see that the Enemy Controller lasts all the way to our own turn. Now we can use our opponent's monster as link material, and you'll see how this affects the game as we're able to go into the Phoenix, use the effect of Phoenix pitching the Shrine. We want to keep the shield in hand so that we can get access into our Exodia Incarnate if we need to. Our opponent is going to Imperm. At this point, we're pretty well off here as we're going to use the effect of the shield, get ourselves the Caveman, use the effect of the shield, pay a couple thousand life points, get ourselves crossed, then we can activate the Sengenjin. The really cool thing about this is that because the Sengenjin or the Cavemans are 2750 each, that's 5500, then we can go into the Promethean Princess, which is another 2700, giving us 8200 damage. We'll be able to attack for game this way, as this will wrap up game 1. Now, this next replay is pretty weird just because of the duplicates that we happen to see in this one. We're also going second against Labyrinth, and they do have Droll, which ends up being really impactful, but we'll see that our opponent is going to resolve the Kuklok along with the Chandra. They'll get themselves the big welcome. They also have the welcome, and this was kind of worst case scenario. I had to use the Harpy's Feather Duster off rip just because the Millennium monsters, if they go into the spell and trap zone and you don't have another way to get them there, then you can't get them back on there, and you won't be able to get their special summons, and you won't be able to continue your engine this way. So really only 2 disruptions kind of stops this hand, and that's what made this particular game really hard, especially with the Droll. But we're going to see our opponent use the effect of the Big Lady, and this will be able to also get themselves the Chandra. They'll also be able to use the effect of the Welcome, as they'll be able to get it back onto the field. They'll be able to destroy a card from our hand, which luckily wasn't the Exodia piece. That is one big weakness that this deck kind of has. has, but we'll then be able to activate the Golem, which will get us the Shrine, get hit by the Droll, which again really hurts, as we're then going to activate the Shrine, use its effect in order to place the Caveman along with the shield. Now we'll get 2 more bodies, but here comes another weakness that gets exposed throughout this deck, that once we commit this hard into the board and have 2,000 life points left, that Caveman in hand is essentially dead now since we can't special summon it. And we're then going to use the effect of the Phoenix popping the back row. Our opponent will then use the Chandra. At this point, I'm really just doing whatever here because I know that my opponent can just play around one Promethean Princess with all the resources they have. So at this point, I'm just going to go into the Princess, revive the Phoenix, then we're going to go into the Ambo. From here, we'll then be able to attack over the Big Lady, and from here, we'll then go on to our opponent's turn, where they're going to then summon out the Kuklok. Our opponent can then use the Welcome or the Big Welcome, as they'll be able to special summon out the Lady. Now, at this point, I'm just going to use the effect of the Promethean Princess as a response, just because I'm basically scooping. Our opponent can force out the top of the Whale here, as if we wanted to play this correctly, we would just get the Phoenix back so that we can save the Promethean Princess, but there's nothing that we can do with that, just because our opponent has ways to attack over the Nightmare Phoenix, have the big body, and just play around the Promethean Princess altogether. It's also important to note that I only had 1 monster left in hand for the Shrine, and I couldn't even use any of my Millennium monsters to special summon themselves, and the Droll and Lockbird top deck wasn't going to cut it, so I'm just going to stop the replay short here, as our opponent does take this game. Now this next replay shows one of the strong pros about this deck, and this is against another fire deck, the new Snake Eye stuff, and I actually want to take a moment to read over Snake Eye Dramatic Chase. It's another card that's coming in Legacy of Destruction, I believe. It says place 1 Diabellstar monster from your hand, deck, or graveyard face up in its owner's spell and trap zone as a continuous spell. During the end phase, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target 1 monster card treated as a continuous spell you control, special summon it. You can only use each effect of Dramatic Snake Eye Chase once per turn. Now we're going to use the effect of Shield, special summoning it, getting ourselves the Millennium Cross. Again, we want to do this in order for us to not pay any more life points. I also would like to point out that I am kind of being greedy with the Shifter, because if we did happen to get hit by Droll on the Shield, it meant we would just get the Exodia Incarnate, pass to our opponent, and have the follow-up with the Droll and the Shifter for our opponent's turn. But the entire goal that I had with Shifter set because of this hand and having the Shield was that I could use the Shifter on my opponent's turn so that Shifter would last an extra turn. So we're then going to be able to use the Caveman. We don't have to pay any life points because we have the Cross in hand, as we'll then be able to get ourselves another copy of Shield, activate the Cross. From here we'll be able to get ourselves the Incarnate. We'll then go into the end phase where we'll get the Exodo Flame, and from here we'll pass on to our opponent, and they're going to use the draw phase Snake Eye Chase. Now they didn't have to activate it in the draw phase, they could have waited since this isn't a card that adds anything, but now that we see what our opponent is playing, we're just going to use the effect of Shifter, and our opponent is going to place their next new card, the Snake Eyes Diabellstar. It's a level 8 that reads, when an attack is declared involving this card and an opponent's monster, you can place both that opponent's monster and this card face up in their owner's spell and trap zone as a continuous spell. While this card is treated as a continuous spell, you can target 1 fire monster in your graveyard except Snake Eyes Diabellstar, place it face up in its owner's spell and trap zone as a continuous spell, and if you do, special summon this card. You can only use each effect of Snake Eyes Diabellstar once per turn. So some really cool support and some really awesome artwork that the deck is getting here, but we're then going to be able to see our opponent normal summon the Poplar. At this point, I just think that they're playing to play because they can't really do anything under Shifter. They don't want to link away. They're going to place the Flambers there, but at this point, I'm going to use the effect of the Phantom Incarnate, and right before I could activate the Exodo Flame in order to board wipe our opponent and then banish all their stuff, they did end up scooping. It's like in the previous one where you saw that we got pretty lucky, we did have Shifter. This one shows the exact opposite, where you can also get really unlucky. In this case, we do happen to open 2 Exodia pieces, and our opponent is on Chimera Exodia, which I don't know about that, but we'll then see that our opponent is going to special summon out the Chimera. From here, they can then continue their turn by getting their effects. I do hit them with the Droll, so they won't be able to get any more additions this turn. They will get the Chimera Fusion back in hand, and you'll see how well Chimera matches up with the Exodia stuff, which is pretty crazy. They do hit the Exodia head, and at this point, my entire deck just folds. Each Exodia piece is only at 1, and Millennium Cross can't reveal from the graveyard, so there's nothing that we can do here but activate Prosperity and maybe Enemy Controller, but that would mean normal summoning the left arm or the left leg. And then we'll activate the Prosperity here. We'll then be able to get ourselves the Shrine, as we're then going to activate the Shrine. And this just shows how frail the deck can be when you don't have all 5 pieces of Exodia in deck. So our opponent is going to activate the Chimera Fusion, get themselves Guardian Chimera, and from here, once they pop our cards, we just can't play anymore. They are eventually going to end up popping the Caveman, and I'm just going to scoop. Now, I saved the best for last, and the Sky Striker replay is really nice because it shows the interactions that this deck has, as Sky Strikers is a very interactive deck, but we're then going to be able to use the effect of Pot of Prosperity. We'll reveal ourselves 3 monsters, add ourselves the Golem, use the effect of Golem, which will get us into the Shrine. I am going to commit pretty hard into life points here, as we are going to get the Shrine. We'll place the Exodia head on the board, as we'll get ourselves the Millennium Shield. Use the effect of the Millennium Shield. We don't want to get into the Caveman so that we can save those 2,000 life points. Activate the Millennium Cross, as we'll then be able to get ourselves the Incarnate. We have Econ and Super Poly, which is really nice, but we'll then be able to go on to the end phase, where we'll get the Flame, and this is the ideal setup that you really want. If this was Droll, that would also be nice. If it was even Shifter that you could activate before the Prosperity, that would be nice as well. Just having the board wipe via the Flame, having the Enemy Controller that you contribute one of your dead bodies here, and then the Super Poly is just all great interruptions this format, as we're then going to pass on to our opponent, and you're going to see that I am going to end up using the Exodo Flame on the multi-roll once they set a card, and the reason for this is because I wanted my Exodia negate to be live. I felt like if our opponent's Sky Striker cards became unnegatable, if that makes sense, and this would be a really hard matchup when it didn't need to be one, and we're going to see our opponent then use the effect of Engage. Now, they did do something weird here where they used the effect of the Afterburner. They're going to end up popping the Golem. I'm going to use the effect of the Exodia Incarnate. I'll end up using the Widow Anchor on that. They didn't get a second pop here with the Afterburner, though. I don't know if I'm missing something. I did target a monster on the field and get that pop, which is why the Golem is in the Spell and Trap Zone. So I don't get why there wasn't an additional pop, but they are going to normal summon out the Ray. We'll then be able to Super Poly from here, as we'll then be able to go into the Mud Dragon. We'll then go on to our turn, as our opponent doesn't have anything they can do with just a Link Gauge in hand, and we do draw into Shifter. The really cool thing is that Shifter isn't a dead draw because we have the Shrine, so we can get ourselves the Shield. We'll then be able to get ourselves into the Exodia Incarnate, and from here I would like to point out that you could technically have gone for game. I didn't want to play heavily into any sort of hand trap, so I'm just going to get the Millennium Cross, as I felt that because we were playing Sky Strikers and knowing how low our opponent was on cards, one Exodia negate was going to be enough, especially when we had the Econ plus a card that we would be able to get off of the Exodia Incarnate, which would end up being the Obliterate. But we're going to put the Mud Dragon back into the deck along with the Exodia piece that was in the Spell and Trap Zone. We'll use the effect of the Exodia in the battle phase, making it 2k attack, and at this point our Exodo Flame, or our Exodia, also pretty strong here because it's 2k attack, which just gave us even more of an advantage, as we're going to add ourselves the head of Exodia, use the effect of the Phantom Incarnate, getting ourselves Obliterate. Our opponent is going to end up top decking an Imperm. They're going to try to bait the Phantom Incarnate, but I wasn't taking it, as I knew everything that I had. Because they only have the Link Gauge in hand, they can't continue to play from here. So with all of the replays out of the way, we can get onto the deck profile. The first thing I would like to mention is that you either have 2 options between the Pot of Prosperity and the Small World. If you play the Small World, you would just replace the pot along with the Harpy's Feather Duster and the Exodo Blaze for the Fiend Reflections, and what this allows you to do is not only get the life point gains, but you can also banish the Fiend Reflection, banish the Droll, get yourself into the Dynasty, which gets you into your cross, so that's pretty nice. You also have to look at the fact that Sengenjin, or the Caveman, along with the Golem and the Shield, are all different in everything but the attributes, so that means that Small World works with them as well. Then I also would like to mention that if you choose to play any Ghost Girl hand trap or multiple Ghost Girl hand traps, you also have the ability to synchro into 8, 9, or 11 with the Caveman. But then there's also stuff like the Typhon along with Appaloosa and the Access Code, which are other extra deck options that you can play if you choose not to go with the Fire approach. I just find the Fire approach interesting for the deck's grind game, which is really nice. nice. But then there's also stuff like Lightning Storm and Cosmic Cyclone that I would probably recommend in the side deck just for matchups like Labyrinth. As you saw, back row can be kind of annoying, especially when it starts to recur itself like Labyrinth can. But outside of that, the main differences that you'll see from the list that I posted last week are the fact that we did change up the going second cards a bit. Droll might come out, I'm unsure of that yet. I feel like if you take out Droll, you open the Pandemonium that is Rogue right now, so I'm still unsure about taking this out. Then we do have the Super Poly and the Enemy Controller. Great going second cards overall, and the flexibility that you get with Enemy Controller, being able to tribute off, take something that your opponent has, either link away with your opponent's monster, or even play around potential hand traps if you happen to play any normal summons. I've seen a video with Deep Sea Diva as its normal summon. I'll leave the link down below. I don't remember who it was. If you do want to do something like that, that's a possibility. Then there's also the Shifter, which is just a great card that you can play in this deck because the combos that you do with this deck, you don't get any cards into the graveyard, so you can even pass on to your opponent's turn and get yourself that turn 3 Shifter as well, as you saw in one of the previous replays. But with that, I'm just going to get you onto the card by card, as I don't have much else to say about the deck. And we have the 3 Golems, the 3 Shields, the 3 Cavemans, the 3 Prost, the 5 pieces of Exodia with the 1 Harpy's Feather Duster, the Obliterate, the Exodia Flame, and the Exodia Blaze, the 3 Millennium Cross along with the 1 Terraforming and the 3 Shrines, the 3 Dimension Shifter, the 3 Drolls, the 3 Super Polys, the 3 Econs, the 1 SP, the 1 IP. We do play the 3 Charmers. Dark is here because we also play Mask, and it's pretty nice that you can just steal a potential opponent's Dark boss monster and take over the game from there, since there still is a lot of Dark decks. Yubel is another deck that probably will see a spike in popularity for a short time before it dwindles when people kind of realize how many bricks you have to play. We're then going to see the Nightmare Phoenix, the Nightmare Unicorn, the Promethean Princess, the Whale, the Underworld Goddess, Mud Dragon, Garura, and then we have the 3 copies of Incarnate to round out the deck profile. So for everyone who's made it this far, I'd like to thank you for watching and for the 700 plus subs. I truly appreciate your support, and now that we've monetized the channel, giving us access to supers and memberships means that more awesome stuff is on the horizon. To get the channel membership, just click on the description below, and there will be a link that takes you there. You'll also notice a free Discord link that I've made for us too. If you want to support me as a content creator, even if you can't donate supers or get a membership for the channel, clicking on those thumbs up and subscribe buttons help a lot too. For those wondering, I do plan on making updates to the channel as the support on the channel grows. Anyways, I hope to see you on the next one. It's Bones, signing out.